I'm Nancy West. I'm with the Conservation Commission, Town's Conservation Commission, and the Resiliency and Sustainability Committee. This is Mary Ann Make, who's chair of everything in town related to conservation. She's chair of the Conservation Commission. She's chair of the Resiliency and Sustainability Committee, which is a relatively new committee. She's on the task force for the comprehensive plan. I think she's on the Marine Resources Committee, and she's in charge of unplugging the television.
We won't tell them that I also film for the town.
Yes, she also films for the town. And we are in fact being filmed now, which is going to be pretty embarrassing. So as part of the Conservation Committee, several years ago, I think this might even have been pre-COVID, we started noticing that trees were coming down. And we were concerned about trees coming down in Harpswell, and we had people on the committee from all over town. So it wasn't just, I live over on East Harpswell. It wasn't just one part. And then we also realized that there's this inseparable connection to water resources. In the summer of 2021 and 2022, we had droughts. So those two things came together in our heads. Because as we have learned, there is this connection between having vegetation, particularly trees, and being able to replenish a water supply. We all depend upon wells here in Harpswell. And wells are fed by groundwater. If you're lucky, when you drill a well, you tap into a fracture that has groundwater. And the source of the groundwater ultimately is precipitation. So when you have a dry summer and you have lots of guests, then the precipitation isn't feeding into your groundwater fast enough, and some people over on North Island and Bailey Island end up having water supply problems. So we became conscious of this and decided that it was important enough that we need to think about this as a community, and we need to help people understand and learn how to keep precipitation on their land so that it can sink into the ground. And on the other side of that, also learn ways to reduce their water use. So we're thinking of this as a kind of a household water budget. There's a certain, although it would be a residential property water budget, where there's a certain amount of water coming from the sky onto the surface. Some of that goes into the ground, and some of that you tap into, some of which you squander, and some of which you use carefully. So those are the things that we're going to be talking about today. Our purpose then is to provide information and resources as well, and we have a table full of resources to help you keep water on your land so that it can seep into the wells, and also so that it doesn't go into the marine waters, carrying whatever is on the surface into the marine water. So it protects our marine resources as well. And then also how to reduce your water use. Feel free to ask questions. Please, this is not going to be a formal event by any means.
Feel free to tell me when you want me to change the slide.
Why don't you go ahead and change the slide?
Okay.
So, why are we so interested in water? It's because all of us in Harpswell rely on wells. Last summer I was driving somewhere having to do with this program that we call Waterwise, how you can be wise about your water use. And I saw this giant truck. So literally I turned around so I could get a picture of this truck. It was early in the season, but I couldn't believe the timing. I figured, okay, this is serendipity at work here. Mm-hmm. I think this may have been somebody filling a swimming pool because of where I saw it. It wasn't a place where there would have been any commercial use or giant condos or anywhere. But this is what I think all of us are trying to avoid having to do for our own houses. So one of the things that I appreciate so much about Harpswell, being a relative newcomer, we came in 2015 in November, and we're year-round, but one of the things I really value here is the sense of community. And so we hope to tap into that sense of community over coming years to make sure that all of us have access to groundwater, which means that what my husband and I do at our house might well affect our neighbors and vice versa, and that's where the sense of community comes in. So we're making presentations in the community, and if you're a member of a club and want us to come make a presentation, we'd be happy to do that. We're all in this together. As Mark Ironman, our town planner, says, we all sip from the same sponge? Yes.
Yes,
We all sip from the same sponge, it's in the sponge being the groundwater supply. So we're in this together, and Harpswell seems to be very well set up for that. All right, there are a number of small things that you can do to make sure that the water stays on the land. We will go into some of that today. Marianne, I'm going to give this a shot.
okay.
Okay, so first of all, I talked about a budget. Think of it in terms of a supply chain. So precipitation comes down. If it's snow and it melts and the ground isn't frozen, then that water seeps into the ground. If the ground is frozen, obviously it can't. If we get downpours, then the rain may come too hard, too fast to be able to seep in. If you have pools, like vernal pools, which are pools which dry up in the spring, those vernal pools are good catchment basins for precipitation, either snow melt or rainfall, and the water can percolate into the ground slowly and steadily. Harpswell now gets something like 48 inches of rainfall, 48.5 inches of precipitation a year. That's the annual average from 1991 to 2020. It's a 30-year average. And that's in Bath. Bath's 30-year average is up 3 inches from the previous 30-year average, which was 1981 to 2010. So Bath has gained 3 inches of rainfall over the last 10 years. Well, over the 30-year average starting 10 years. Starting in 1981 as opposed to starting in 1991. Brunswick, on the other hand, is down an inch. The other thing to note, though, so that's changed. Bath is up 3 inches, Brunswick is down an inch. The other thing to note, though, is that our precipitation doesn't come evenly throughout the year, and it doesn't come evenly from year to year, as we've learned comparing last summer to this summer, for instance. So it's only an average. Predictions for climate change are that we will have wetter, warmer climate, but the predictions are also that there could well be wild fluctuations. So you'll have a time of drought, and then you'll have a time of a lot of precipitation, and that could happen in the same season, as we have all experienced. All right, but the working number here is 48 inches of rainfall per year in Harpswell. It's fickle. The precipitation is fickle. I don't get it. Oh, this is dueling.
Dueling, go ahead.
Okay. So we all draw water from wells, and around here in Harpswell, most of us have wells that come into, that are drilled wells, old wells. Many of the old wells are dug wells, but the new wells are drilled wells. They go into hard rock. I say hard rock, I'm a geologist by training. That's actually kind of a buzzword in geology. They go into metamorphic and igneous rocks, not sedimentary rocks, that are fractured. And if you're lucky, you hit a fracture that carries water, and then you can tap into that. Our aquifer, if you look at the geological reports that have been done over the last 40 years here in Harpswell, the term aquifer is used as water-bearing rock, or rock from which you can draw water in a well. So when people use the word aquifer, they can use it in very different senses. In Harpswell, the geologists say if you drill into it and it draws water, then it's an aquifer. There are also some small isolated pockets of glacial sand and gravel, which are vastly different from the ledge that most of us draw from. And water can flow through those as well, but those are pretty local. Yes?
Is everything you say, does it apply to all parts of Harpswell, like
Yes.
the peninsula?
Yes.
the
Yes.
islands?
Whether you're on the islands or on the peninsula, it's the same.
Yeah, I think I just
Thank
interject
you.
a little bit here. I think the thing to think about, because we're an island, in effect, all of Harpswell, we can't tap into anybody else's water, and we have to get it from what is ever under us, which is under the rock. And some places are better at finding it than others. Yeah.
So I want you to realize this is a cartoon and there's no sense of scale, although that says 40 feet there. But in Harpswell, in most cases, the pore space are very, very small. You know, if you go out onto the ledge, there are these plates that are stacked up against each other, and they're often upright and so on. but the pores, individual pores are small, and if those pores are connected, then the water can flow through it. So you have both porosity, you've got holes in your rock or gaps between the plates, and you have permeability, which means that the water can flow from one part of say your property to another part of your property. That can happen at very slow rates. If you're lucky and have a bigger fracture, then it can happen at a faster rate. But it would be very hard to predict, to compare what happens at my house, to even what happens at my neighbor's house. So, the rocks are in some ways consistent, but the specifics of how much fracture permeability you have, how good your aquifer is, will vary, could be from house to house. And that's what makes the planning so difficult.
So Nancy, I'm thinking of the people who are here and some of who I know where they live.
Mm-hmm.
It's just interesting, I know that the Himeses live right on the water, on facing the east shore, and I'm not sure what your water situation was when you went to drill your well. If it was something they found easily?
Did they find water easily when we drilled our?
Yes, and if it's important what we're asking, we're 90 feet deep with 9 gallons a minute.
That's very good for
Is that good?
Harpswell.
But it's-
And I'm trying to remember where you have your well, which is down in Little Harbor.
Yeah, down next to the Driftwood Inn. We're 120 feet, 7 gallons a minute.
Okay.
Never run out.
Yeah.
Well, we
Go
have,
ahead.
I live down on the grassy road, or we have a cottage on the grassy road.
Right.
I think the well is like 400 feet.
Yeah.
And they get like a quarter of a gallon a minute or something.
It's not as great as some of
Very
the
low.
other areas in town, and I'm not sure where you both live.
We live near Mitchell Field
Oh, yeah, okay,
on
okay.
Birchmere Lane, yeah. I'm not sure how deep our well is. It was drilled. We bought the house. It was already built.
Yeah.
If you take the well cap off, it might tell you, there might be information there, and there's also the Maine Geological Survey has a web page where you can go, and if you're lucky, your well is on that, and you click on the dot, and it tells you how deep it is and how deep they found water. So that's available online, and it's kind of cool. But I look at our neighborhood, and probably only a third of the houses in our neighborhood show up on that map.
Yeah.
Are they older houses or in
No.
general?
Doesn't matter.
No. It seems fairly random as to what appears and what doesn't appear. I want to say that sometime in the 90s, the state passed a law which said that all new wells, the data must be sent to the Maine Geological Survey. And so in theory, all of those are on, but that's not in fact the case where we are.
And that was when they were doing everything with pencil and paper.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I think the state has the information, but they have not uploaded it
Right.
to be electronic.
It is fun to noodle on that website though. And there was a well drilled east of here in Harpswell on the east side of Lowell's Cove, maybe 2-3 summers ago. It went to 500 feet and it was dry.
Wow.
I know, and that would be such a nightmare.
Yeah.
And the folks on Blueberry Lane, right down the road here.
that's
Yeah, where you are.
Yeah.
You're very, very deep wells there, because you're one of the highest,
Well, there's a community well too.
and you have a community well.
Oh, do
don't
you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
That
interesting.
source is
Yeah.
20 of the houses?
Wow.
Yeah.
And it was explained to me that part of the reason you do so, you're so, basically the water seeps into the pipe
Yeah.
from down here. It has to recharge, and it gets the water from whatever's trickling through the rock. Has to recharge. And the longer the pipe, the better supply because it,
I hope so. Yeah.
Well, the
Yeah.
the pipe itself acts as a reservoir.
right.
So if they hit water at 50 feet, they're still going to drill deeper because that is
Yeah.
water stored in there for you to draw from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, we drilled our first house we built on Blueberry Lane, we were down 507 feet,
Wow,
and it was like a gallon a minute. So it was,
that's not so good.
no, it's,
That's discouraging.
oh yeah, we fractured it, and it was like, that didn't help. Yeah.
So,
So don't be fooled by the size of these fractures. That's probably not the case in most of Harpswell. The fractures are tiny little spaces in between plates of the Cape Elizabeth Formation that you see anytime you're on the shore, and there's mostly upright rock.
yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
What,
Yes.
yeah, if I, so let's say my neighbor is having troubles, am I, or can, is there an aquifer, is?
That's an interesting
You
question.
don't know.
We
You don't know,
If they're having trouble, I'm gonna have trouble, or?
maybe, but maybe not.
Yeah.
That's what you don't know, and I wanna come back to that
Okay.
at the end. Because there may be a way to find out if you're lucky, but I don't know, it's all hypothetical. There are, Mary Ann can give you the names of these 3 geological hydrogeology reports. There was one done in 1984 and one done in 2008, which was an update from one done in 2004. 2008 one is the most modern and it uses geographic information systems. So these are geologists surveyed as best they could the hydrogeology in Harpswell, and they're available online. And they're fairly interesting. Certainly the 1984 one has an executive summary that is designed for the public, so.
And as far back as that was, people talk about the Gerber Rand report.
Mhm.
Bob Rand was from Conyers Harbor area, and Bob Gerber, I believe, was over on the neck somewhere. And that report was, it's old, but it's really very, very current.
And very readable.
And
Where is the report?
They're available online.
on the town website, under planning office,
Okay.
and you scroll down and it'll say reports and studies, and you just, they're sort of chronological. The one in 2008 was to try to focus in a little bit better and see if they could refine what they found out 20 years ago. And they added a little bit talking about just a little bit more, but it was sort of the same thing. It's not anything definite that you can figure out.
Right. It would be great if you could, because then all the planning could refer to that, but it's a great unknown. And the 2008 one uses GIS, which had come along since the previous one, so it's more modernly designed. All right, next up. We want to emphasize, as we have been, that you want to keep water on your land. When the precipitation falls, if you're concerned about your well and your neighbor's wells, do what you can to keep water on your land and avoid having water run down. Apparently here, there's a very steep slope.
This is on Blueberry, this is on Blueberry Lake.
Is that on the list?
Yeah.
And there isn't as much vegetation here. So water is run down and you can see this big plume of sediment plus whatever is with that sediment. And if you have a dog, for instance, then the dog poop is ending up in the water. So we're trying to keep the water here and not have it run down into that. It benefits the people who live here, benefits the people who make their living off the water there. So we're going to focus on that for a little bit. So we're going to do two things, two-pronged approach. One is protect and increase the infiltration and precipitation into the ground, which is keeping water on the land, and then after that is reduce the water use. So that's the gist of the talk. So vegetation is critical. Best is for, if you're trying to conserve water and capture it on the ground, best is a mixed forest. Next best would be a forest with minimal vegetation. Next best would be meadow. Next best would be lawn and shrubbery. Worst would be asphalt and a roof, right? So, and we're going to address that a little bit more. So we're going to focus on plants. We'd also like you to think about, if you're working on your landscaping, think about plants that don't use much water, that are native plants to Harpswell or to Maine, coastal Maine, because they're adapted to the conditions, and certainly once they're established, you won't have to water them. So you won't have to be using well water or other sources of water to maintain them. So we're going to talk about protecting the water infiltration.
Oh, you're already?
Yeah, we're here already. So this is a cartoon created by, I think, the EPA. I should be able to find it on here. We're going to show you, we're going to compare 3 different situations. This one is a natural setting, and of the rainfall, or of the precipitation that falls, 10% of it runs off the ground. Okay, so that's runoff, it's unavoidable. 25% infiltrates into the shallow subsurface, and 25% goes deep into the into the groundwater, goes into the bedrock and into the groundwater, and that's what your wells draw from. And so if you add up 25, 25, and 10, that's 60% of the precipitation. The other 40% goes with evaporation and transpiration from the plants, from the trees and the plants. And that's just, they live, so they evaporate, and the water evaporates from their foliage, and the plants transpire. That's a fairly natural setting. If you begin putting houses on it, and this is not an urban environment or example by any means, it's scattered houses, then the amount of deep infiltration decreases to 21%. And obviously these are generalizations, and this is probably over the country as a whole, so it would be different in Arizona than it would be in Maine. But notice that one is 10% with a more natural setting, and with some structures, the amount of runoff goes to 20%. Less water makes it to the shallow subsurface, and less water makes it into the deep infiltration. That's with 10 to 20% impervious or hard surface, right?
And Nancy, it was funny, I was thinking about that, and I says, it's basically, you go from the 25% to the 20, well, that's like a 4% difference. But it makes like a 15% loss of water.
Of water that can be, that can work its way into your groundwater. All right, and then we come to a place with a lot of houses, cheek by jowl, close to each other, lots of roof, lots of, there's hard surface, perhaps there's a road there, or there are very hard-packed gravel driveways. And here only 15% of the precipitation makes it down into the deep subsurface, so that can be drawn on. 30% is runoff. So the more hard surfaces you have, obviously the more water runs off, and the less water makes it into your groundwater as a potential well water source.
And the more vegetation you keep on your property,
the better the situation for you.
It cushions the water coming down, stops erosion, and slows down the runoff. So even, like when you're trying to figure out what to do towards the shoreline, much better to leave it kind of natural with, maybe 2 to 3 feet. It keeps the Canada geese off your property. And I heard that little thing. But it also allows the water to stay and keeps it from running off. I mean, I'm always amazed, Robin Hood Road, when there's a storm, the amount of erosion that goes down. And I've been on there 12 hours after storm stops and the water's still coming down. And you're at the bottom of the hill, so you...
Is that good? I'm getting all the water.
That's right, you're getting all the water though.
So what you
might
need
like
to
that.
do then is to make contraptions to catch all the water, keep it on your property. So with trees, the roots go down into the ground. The tree breaks the velocity of the rain as it falls, so it slows down. It comes down the branches and it comes down the trunk and follows the roots into the ground, so it feeds in. They drop their leaves or their needles. It makes a nice soft squishy kind of sponge. Creatures live in it, they burrow into the ground, so all these things are good ways to get the water into the ground. So one of the things that you can do is determine how much specific planting can help you on your property. And it's kind of odd to be able to say this, but I want to get this right. The U.S. Forest Service, the Arbor Day Foundation, and a number of arborist organizations have put together a program that's called iTree Design, which is right up here. Don't worry about remembering this because it's on a handout that you're welcome to take home. So one of our colleagues who isn't here today lives nearby on Grassy Road, and she calculated that if she had a 12-inch white pine using this piece of software, this application that is available online for free for anybody who has an internet connection, a 12-inch white pine this year will intercept 1,600 gallons of rain, which means that rain will fall through the tree and slow down and maybe trickle down the trunk and land on the ground slowly, and reduce the stormwater runoff by 26 gallons, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it's not like having a fire hose, you know, at the tree, hit the tree. It's not like having a fire hose, I can't speak. It's not like having the fire hose of the atmosphere coming down and blasting the ground. The tree is breaking the fall and slowing it down. This program also allows you to determine how much carbon dioxide that tree is sequestering. So if you're interested in not just in water but other environmental benefits, this program called iTree Design will give you a sense as what an individual tree or a cluster of trees can do. Ann Wilkes, the librarian here, knows how to use this, and she would be happy to work with you if you're thinking, I want to know what to plant, or should I take this tree out? Should I do what I can to preserve this tree? What are the benefits of this particular tree or this cluster of trees? Ann can help you with it. David Perrier at the Cundy's Harbor Library can help you with it, or we can help you with it. So please feel free to get in touch with us. Emails on one of the handouts there for you to take home. It's really cool. It could help you make landscaping decisions knowledgeably instead of just kind of a scattershot method. Yes?
The problem I have on my land,
Yes?
and I've tried to keep it as close to God made it as possible.
Mhm.
The trees, the evergreens,
Mhm.
they're dying. They just lose their needles and they look like dead skeletons.
Are they hemlocks?
I believe they are.
Okay.
Is it the woolly, whatever it's
Only
called?
indulgent, yes.
It's funny because you can have a tree here that's completely destroyed and one right next to it is perfectly fine. But it's getting to the point where it's hard to keep up with these dead trees. And
Right.
I've got to start getting rid of them.
Right,
And they're useless now
right.
based on what we're talking about. So that, do you feel as though that is the problem, or is it because of the 2 years of dry spell? I'm getting so many conflicting
I
opinions.
think, you
all
Charlie,
the time.
Charlie, I think it's both. I think you get a lot of dry spells, it weakens trees, and if they're tending to have some insect, it just makes it easier for the insect to get the better. But woolly indulgent has become very, very rampant in Harpswell. I mean, it's been on the other side of Harpswell 15 years ago. It's moved in, and up on Cedar Beach Road too, there's a lot of dead hemlocks.
This is in the past 5 years.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, would be probably good at some point if you take them down, leave the stumps in, and, you know, leave a little bit to hold the ground, because you're in a very low area there, as I recall.
Yeah, probably one of the lowest spots in the.
Right. And if you were to replant something, don't put the same thing in.
Right.
Well, I've got
And-
plenty of new stuff coming in.
Or let the new stuff just come in, it will come in, you
Yeah,
get the
so
spruce will come in.
Plenty of new
which is
stuff, coming,
perfect.
but it's the
Yeah.
mature guys that are dying off.
Yeah,
And it's a
that's
shame.
what it sounds like, yeah.
It breaks your heart to see the big trees dying, or to see them uproot because the roots are shallow in ledge.
Yeah, I got that too.
Yeah, I think we all have that, or we all have concerns that that's going to be the case.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry that you have this problem. It's a shame. So I just want to, again, give you a plug. iTree Design. You can look at the URL. You can figure it out yourself. It's really fun to play with. And the Conservation Commission webpage has lists of native plants that should do well here if you're looking for something to replace trees with.
And it's also, that particular listing lists by the type of location. Is it a dry location, a sunny location, a shady location? So it gives you a nice selection of what you could consider to replant with.
And then the software will tell you the benefits of those particular plants, trees. It's pretty cool. All right, so there is a concept called low impact design. Did I get that right?
Development.
I had it written two different ways in the same paragraph, so I thought I'd get it wrong. Okay. So low impact development, or LID, you'll see it often, LID. It is how do you use the natural landscape to essentially trap water on your property. And here is an example that, Marianne, you took this, did you take this picture? No, you got it from Dave's Landscaping. So apparently there's a slope, there's a kind of a swale back here, and there's this gravel path where water would run on down this gravel path into the swale, which is covered with mulch and has trees in it, and it will This is kind of a natural rain garden, or, well, it's not natural, it's a created rain garden that will look natural as the plants grow up. And this will trap water in the property. It will catch it and let it seep in slowly. So here's an example of a rain garden, which is one example of a low-impact development practice. We're going to show you a couple of examples.
And I think what the town is endeavoring to do is adding ordinances. If you're building new or doing a very large redevelopment project on your land, there's a very strong suggestion that you consider ways to keep using low-impact development. Many times on a project, when somebody's building a house, you go in, the first thing they do is they take all the trees down so they can site their house. Bad idea. But then they come in and start leveling everything. There's many natural swales just because of our slopes that.
What is a swale?
A swale is a depression.
Oh,
So I have one on the side of my property where when it rains, it fills up and sits there and then gets down into the water. Well, many people want to keep that really dry. This is a great place to put what they call a rain garden. You put plants in there that do well in the dry and also do well in the wet. And it's a place where you can hold water for a day or so and allow it to really slowly seep into the ground.
So basically, if you were doing a shopping development, you would call it a retention pond. This is a fairly naturalistic retention pond. And if you have a depression or a swale in your property, instead of filling it up so that it's easy to mow your lawn, take advantage of that and use it as a way to capture water, because it may help refill your well and it may help refill your neighbor's well ultimately. Okay, so low impact, LID or low impact development, you might keep your eyes out for that in the future. All right, so where have you seen rain gardens in Harpswell? This is not in Harpswell. You'll see this picture all over the internet if you start doing LID. There's a rain garden. I mean, you can see right here these people have planted. That looks like it isn't goldenrod, but it looks like it might be. It's just a depression that you fill up with plants and leaf litter, and the water goes in there and seeps in. This particular slide comes from another piece of software available online on the internet for free, and I'll show you an example of that just in a few minutes. But this is a calculation done to find out how deep to make your pond and so on, using this particular piece of software done by the EPA. All right, so we have some shots from around this area. Mary Ann's going to lead this discussion because she knows this area better than I do. I'm from the Cunny's Harbor part of the world, north of Cunny's Harbor. This is that away.
Right down there.
Right.
It's actually, I mean, we all.
down the hill on the way to the bridge, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, we gave the program the first time at the yacht club. So I took some pictures from the base of the yacht club. And it's fairly manicured back there as far as the neighbors and everything. This is a shot taken from the road to the yacht club, up the hill. And so it's Route 24 up at the top of the hill, and I don't know whose house that is, but it's right down the street here. And we thought this was a really interesting way to look at how they've used the landscape that just grows there naturally and trimmed it around it to make it neat. I understand they have to keep that wide swath of grass because they bring a boat in and out of there. But we kind of wanted to talk to everybody here to say, how could you take that property and make it even better as far as retaining water?
Because it has a lot of vegetation, it has a lot of trees. Here's the grass. It's not a golf course there. So what do you think you could do to this property
if you wanted to increase, like we're saying?
Can you tell them to stop putting their boat in and?
I'll try that, but they probably wouldn't mind. But there's some
Boats are part of
things.
Harpswell.
This is someone
More
might
trees?
decide to plant a little garden of flowers or something, just to
Could you put something in there?
in there.
Could you reduce this amount of grass and expand that flower bed?
Yeah. So we thought we would show some of these pictures of what we just have locally here and see how you might look at that and think about what you would do if that was your property, if you were trying to hold more water.
And then translate that to how could you do it on your own property? Yes.
Is that Japanese knotweed that's in the,
I think it is.
so that's a whole nother
That's another problem.
issue.
I know.
Like, do you try to replace all those invasives with something?
That
This
is a really hard issue because you want to be sure that you get something back there.
You don't want to have exposed ground.
Right.
Because
you
that'll
pull it
just
all
erode.
out. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a hard issue.
So if you do remove invasives, you want to replant quickly with native plants. You know, but yeah, that's one of Mary Ann's favorite topics, particularly near the water on steep slopes. And we'll show you a picture of that.
Yeah.
All right, so these people are doing a good job. All of us could tweak what we would do in order to,
Right.
build up the vegetation. Remembering that mixed vegetation is really a great way to preserve the water on the land, keep the water on the land. All right, so here's some forests.
This
Can you see this?
is this the one on Grassy Road?
Yes,
Yes,
these
it
are
is.
Grassy Road. These
This
were
is
done
on
by Phil.
Grassy Road, two sides of the street. And we were kind of interested on what they did along the road,
Which I think is the next slide.
which is the next slide.
No, that's not
It's
the
not.
next slide.
But basically, you can see the vegetation growing up underneath. And along the roadway, if you drive Grassy Road, there is a lot of low vegetation that's growing. And that's really good. Well, you live there.
Yeah, I think I know where this is, but I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I guess I do, the road's not that long.
It's not that long, and there's parts of it that could be kept better for erosion control, but that was kind of, we were trying to get an idea of, you can still keep your trees, you can still see the water underneath if they're pruned up. And by letting light in, you will start getting understory low growth, which is very helpful.
In our neighborhood, there are very messy forests, and there are much tidier forests. And both of these are fairly messy. I mean, this has a log which is rotting, there are a bunch of branches which are rotting. So I don't want to say that we advocate for messiness, but if you can get a lot of undergrowth growing and can tolerate that, and can allow the trees to rot, then you're going to have more organic matter, you're going to have more creatures living there, and all of that will foster more infiltration of groundwater.
And you have less work.
And you have less work, exactly. All right, so here's a very natural setting. Tim McCrae took this.
Yeah, I believe that's, I think that's probably Long Reach from the Cliff Trail.
Yeah.
So here you have big trees, you have lichen on the ledge, you got some pretty plant in the fall and a bunch of little plants and mid-sized growth. That's as natural as it can get, and I find it very attractive. So if you can recreate this, then you're probably maximizing the odds of rain getting into your property. Mary Ann, do you want to say anything about it?
No.
Okay. And then here's another option,
So talking about invasive plants, we all hear about rugosa rose. It's an introduced species, being talked about as being partially invasive. It has an invasive growth, but used in the right setting, it does a really good job of holding the ground on steep slopes. This isn't a steep slope, but this is on Long Point Road. And the thing that is good, salt spray doesn't bother it. So, and you'll see it all along the roads here, and you'll see it down by the water here. It holds the ground, it's beautiful. Salt spray doesn't kill it. So it's a case of, I always say, using the right plant in the right place. It saved my hill from because I'm up 80 feet off the water. And, you know, it's still slumping and sloping, but I think it's slowed it down. And then the next slide is right next to it. This is, it's further from the shore. It happens to be, it's actually a freshwater wetland, because it's where the water is draining down Long Point Road just before it goes out to the ocean. And this is a field of wildflowers that were, I assume, planted because they're all the same kind. But then you see the grasses that are growing up naturally. So it's filled in bare ground because they did a lot of development there. So this is a case where right next to each other, you have two different environments, both saltwater and freshwater. And they have done I think a nice job of handling a situation. They had a lot of bare ground after building in a very short period of time. I think like in a year this came up. So,
And none of it is manicured lawn, but
yeah.
I think it's pretty appealing.
Right.
And you know the butterflies and the bees also love it.
Mm.
All right,
This one, this is off of Merritt House Road. What's the name of the road that goes down to the Merritt House? Is that
it's
Merritt House?
Merritt House Road, I think so. Merritt, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is interesting because it's on the left side as you go down.
Oh, I know where that is, yeah.
And you think about it, that's a huge slope, but there's a swale that runs parallel to the ocean, or to the water. Very low, wet, and the vegetation that's growing there is stopping all that runoff from the top of the hill from shooting down the road.
Isn't
So-
there a street called Steamboat Road?
I'm not sure, Charlie.
Steamboat Road, it goes down past the Merritt House?
Yeah. Yes,
You know, it used to be Steamboat Road when I was
Used to
little.
be?
Hmm?
When you were little?
Yeah.
Well, we're probably the same age.
I think they changed the name,
Now it's Merritt House?
when they, yeah, to the Merritt
I
House
know it's
Lane.
Steamboat, I don't know. I've been
But
there
there's a
30
steamboat road down by you that is kind of the same situation.
Oh, Baileyon? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, so.
So,
yes.
so if somebody planted this would be a good example of low impact development. Because their houses are up high, there's a slope, there's lots of vegetation, there are cattails, they're trapping the water in the wetland. They didn't fill it in with topsoil so they could just have a nice smooth lawn and be on a riding mower. This is fairly naturalistic and it's quite good at catching water and keeping it from running off. Okay? All right, this is the road, this is Grassy Lane.
That's Grassy Road, that's the picture I was thinking of.
That's
yeah.
right. We need to move it for the next talk.
Yeah.
So here, I mean, here's a grassy lane, right? There's the lane and there are lots of grasses and shrubs along the edge of it. It's
Oh, well, can I just quickly say, when I was little,
mhm.
the lane, well, actually, it didn't go all the way through, but the part that, only by our cottage,
Mhm.
you know, had the grassy, like, hillock in the middle.
Oh, really?
Wow, okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
So it was grassy.
It's great memory of that, yeah.
I bet. I bet. All right. So limited impact development isn't just about vegetation. It also includes structures that you can use to catch water or to keep water from going downhill. We've talked about swales and rain gardens and so on. Mary Ann took this picture. Here's the ultimate rain barrel. You think a rain barrel as being yay big, right? Here's a cistern right here. This is on Bailey Island. Is it
On
Bailey?
Bailey Island, on Washington Avenue, right before the driftwood.
Yeah.
That house, it's huge. I mean, it's 1 story high. And, yeah.
I talked to a woman at the non-resident taxpayers meeting whose grandfather or great-grandfather built a cottage on Bailey. They have no well. They have cisterns. They have 2 cisterns, one in the basement and one, I guess, outside. I don't know, maybe she was talking about this house. I
No,
don't know.
I know the other house, that's on Ocean Avenue.
Okay. And so we've sort of come to the idea that maybe 19th century technology is appropriate in Harpswell in times of drought, like the last 2 summers, not this summer. That if you're going to put a deck in, can you put a cistern underneath it to use to store rainwater to be able to water your garden or your vegetable garden or you know, your flower garden? So I think we need to be thinking about cisterns. I've never owned one, so maybe, no, that's not true. Maybe if I had a cistern, I wouldn't be such an advocate of it. But I think that's pretty clever. And how cool is that also? So here are future Harpswell rain barrels. Rain barrels are just barrels that you can purchase, or you can repurpose a bait barrel. This is on Hawks Wharf in Cundy's Harbor. You can repurpose a bait barrel and use it and store 55 gallons worth of water by feeding from a downspout into it, or have a gutter with a chain feeding into it, and then you can draw water from it. Conservation Commission has had a design for making a rain barrel. It needs revising. We'll get it up and revised and put it online. But basically you need a spigot here. You need to elevate this so that you can drain water out of the bottom. You put a spigot and you have a hole in the top so that the water can feed into it. And you put something across the hole so the mosquitoes can't get in there and lay their eggs.
And it's much more reasonable cost-wise than buying a rain barrel online.
And you might have noticed that there are in fact bait barrels around. So. So that's a rain barrel. All right, so here I want to come back to this program called the EPA's National Stormwater Calculator, and I showed it to you. I mentioned it with respect to the rain garden. Again, Ann Wilkes knows how to use this program. She'd be happy to work with you, as would we, as would David Perry over in Cundy's Harbor. It allows you to take a property, and I just roughly outlined the Orr's Island Library property here. I have no idea what the boundaries really are. And you put in parameters. It pulls up a soils map, and so you say, yep, that's the kind of soil you have here. And you just look at the map and say, okay, I'm going to believe that that's the kind of soil we have here, and what kind of slope your property is. And then you do an estimation that I completely winged it on this one, which is how much of the property outlined here is forest, how much is meadow, how much is grass, and how much is hard surface, and how much is desert. Well, obviously desert doesn't count. So I just estimated that. And then it asks what is the precipitation, or it tells you what the precipitation is, and it was 48 inches, so that was about right. And then you say, what could I do? What limited impact development practices could I use? Could I put in a rain garden? Could I put in rain barrels? So I did that for this property. I estimated how much roof area there is on the library. You know, it was a ballpark figure because I actually don't know this property very well. And the calculations are really pretty interesting. If you take 75% of the hard surface, which I think is mostly roof on this property, and feed that into rain barrels or a cistern, of the 48 inches of precipitation a year, without those rain barrels, 34.5 inches of that 48 inches would run off. If you put rain barrels fed by 75% of the roof, it drops to 21 inches. So it goes from 34 inches of precipitation running off to 21 inches of precipitation running off. If 3/4 of the hard surface in this property, using my very rough estimates, were fed into rain barrels. So you can do this with your house. You probably know where the boundaries of your property are. You know what the square footage of your house is, and whether you have a paved driveway and so on. So this allows you to calculate what would be the most effective and also cost-effective methods for you to catch the water using limited impact development. And it's cool. It's a very cool program. It's available online. We've written the URL, how to get to it on the resources sheet. Anne can walk you through it. When we showed it to her, she was immediately playing with it with her property. Like she got completely absorbed in it. So it's very powerful and very useful. And it allows you to determine what kind of limited impact development, rain barrels, rain gardens, what else you could do to enhance the infiltration of water on your property. And it's fun. All right, two-pronged approach. We talked about use vegetation. Go for mixed forests if you can, avoid perfect pristine lawns if you can, avoid hard surfaces if you can. We all know you have to be able to plow in the winter, but you do the best you can to trap the water. Use things like rain barrels. And then also reduce your water use if you can. So how can you use less water? Well, I want to get
Talk
these,
about the bathroom.
I want to get these numbers right. All right. Apparently, nationwide, the average water use is 75 gallons per person per day. So a toilet uses 24% on average. So a quarter of the household water, I think this is indoor water use, is a toilet. Shower 20%, washing machine 17%, and leaks typically use up 12% of your water. I know, it's astounding, but that's apparently the national average. So one of the things you can do, and I want you to go home and do this, take some food coloring, put a couple drops in the tank, back here in the tank, wait 10 minutes. If the water in the bowl is the color of the tank, that means you have a leak. You probably have a leaky flapper valve and you need to replace it. And if you don't know how to replace it, Google Portland, City of Portland replace water valve, and you'll see a very nice, maybe 25-year-old woman without plumber pants teaching you how to replace the flapper valve. So Portland is really making an effort to get people to use less water. So simple and effective, and do it every couple of months just to make sure that your toilet isn't leaking, because 12% of water apparently in the average American household goes down the drain from a leak.
I'll have to throw this one in, I'm just thinking. For those of us who don't have a bunch of kids running around in the house, you probably could just stand there and hear leaks in the house if one of the toilet bowls was running. Because it happens in my house and it's sort of like, where is it? So I think you might even hear the trickle. If you
Yes, but
have a
I have
quiet
also
house.
read that apparently there can be leaks that you just
Don't
you know,
even
you
hear.
don't
I'm
even
sure,
hear.
I'm
Right.
sure.
And some of us are old enough that hearing isn't as good as it used to be. But you can see colored water in the toilet bowl. I thought that was pretty cool. And obviously, look under the sink. Look to see if there are wet spots under the sink. And sometimes there are there, and you just, you know, how often do you really examine what goes on under the sink? But it's worth checking occasionally. So look for leaks. We have some bookmarks over here. Well, they are bookmarks. Rat cards over here, which give you some clues as to what you can do in your own house. And we would be happy to share any great ideas that any of you have. And I'll throw one out that my husband and I use. Our bathroom, just as an example, our bathroom is a long way from a hot water heater. So if we want to have hot water, say to wash our faces in the evening, all the water has to run from the hot water tank in the garage into our bathroom. We happen to have an electric tea kettle, so we put that in the bathroom. So you just heat up a little bit of water, cold water in the electric tea kettle, instead of running water for 5 minutes to get hot water from the garage into the bathroom. So any of you have brilliant ideas that you want to share about how you can reduce your own water use? Yes,
Does
Charlie.
anyone here have any ideas about the tankless water heater? Because I've got the same issue. The water tanks, the hot water heater way over here, my bathroom's way over here. And you know, you swear to God, it takes 3 gallons of water or more before you get hot water out of the tank. And people say, well, a tankless water heater is what you need.
Yes.
I'm not so sure with that long run if it's gonna work if you're in there taking a shower.
Well, when my daughter lived, I was gonna say, when my daughter lived in Japan, that's what they had. I think the problem is you have to put them in when you build a house almost, because they're in the wall. And there might be others now, but they were very effective.
Did you want
Used them in
to
Europe.
say something?
If you have access, you can put in a hot water recirculation system where it circulates a 1/4-inch line, it circulates water from, little pump circulates water up to your furthest
really?
faucet.
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah,
For
really.
hot water recirculation.
Yeah, it took 45 seconds to get hot water to my shower. We put a hot water, our shower, put a hot water circulation system in. I reach in, turn the faucet on, and get in, close the door, and take a shower.
Interesting.
That's
Yes.
interesting.
I've never heard of that.
I'd be interested in.
And, you know,
details.
it's, you, talk to Smith Brothers Plumbing, they know how to do it.
Okay,
Charlie Burnham knows how to do it.
does he? Yeah.
The- It's a 1/4 inch line, it runs along with your hot water line, they put the Armaflex insulation on afterwards, and it takes energy to, of course, to run the pump, and the pump runs constantly to keep the hot water there, but it's a very small amount, and it's just
What's it called again?
hot water recirculation system. And it just works.
It's
And
interesting.
Mary Ann advocates taking a 5-gallon bucket and holding it under your shower head while your shower head is pouring out cold water when you're waiting for it to get hot water.
That's what I do.
So you can use that cold
Take a
water
2-gallon
to,
bucket and just do it, it gets hot, and I save that to flush the toilet.
Yeah.
Oh.
right.
yep, yep. Other ideas? I saw some hands up over here. Okay.
Well, turning off the water when you're brushing your teeth.
Yeah, that's very, very, very
Stuff like
true.
that.
Well, if you think of a solution that will save the world, please email the Conservation Commission and we'll have arrows pointing at your name.
I've
Yes,
heard about people putting a brick in the back of their toilet so that
They're
it
using
keeps the
less
water
water.
level up higher. Is
so,
that true?
yes, yes, but if a new toilet has at the base of the tank, it'll tell you how many gallons per flush.
Yeah.
If it isn't written there, then you probably are using a lot of water and you might want to consider replacing the toilet. The standard for low flush toilets used to be 1.6 gallons per flush and it's now 1.3 gallons per flush. So the toilets have gotten more efficient.
And the brick, I think, is what people use prior to replacing their toilet, but it basically puts less water in.
Yeah.
Yeah, toilet technology has improved.
Mhm.
So. Okay, other ideas? All right, we're reaching the end here.
I think we are.
All right, so, actually, let me back up. A number of my women friends and I talk about having house guests, because that happens a lot in Harpswell in the summer. And some of my friends have said they now take laundry up to the laundromats, they take the sheets and towels up to the laundromats in Brunswick. Because you can get a lot done and you're using Brunswick water instead of well water. We have had some conversations about asking guests to bring their own sheets and towels and then taking the dirty ones home, which is kind of extreme, but there has been conversation about that. But how do you know, say it's not this summer, but last summer, how do you know whether or not you have a problem, you're about to be facing a problem, say at the south end of Orr's Island or on Bailey, and you're thinking, I don't know if I'm gonna run out of water. I mean, how do you do, well, one thing is you pay attention to what your neighbors are saying, and you're hoping that what affects your neighbors also affects you, so that you have some knowledge. But you could also build yourself a water well sounder, and they're on this handout, the information that you need from the University of Arizona's Extension Agency teaches you how to make a water well sounder, which is just, this is lamp wire that you put weights on one side, you expose a lead here and a lead there, and you have an ohmmeter on the top or a little buzzer or something on the top, and an energy source, so that when you drop this down your well and when this device hits water and the current is carried through the water, then you get a signal. So you can monitor the water level in your well over time. So you might say, okay, April, May, when there's lots of precipitation in the ground and you're not drawing a lot of water, you don't have a lot of guests, find out measure the water level in your well, and then monitor it over the summer. And if it starts plummeting, then you at least have warning, and you can tell your 15-year-olds that no, they can't have a 15-minute shower today. In fact, they need to go swimming and then just rinse off with fresh water. So you can build a device with instructions coming from the University of Arizona to monitor the water level in your well, and you can keep your eye on it. Or you can pay between $800 and $1,200 to buy a pre-manufactured one. So my husband and I have talked about doing this, and I have to borrow an O-meter from a neighbor who also is also an electrician. And we have to replace the screws on our well cap, but we're getting ready to do it. So with respect to neighbors, what we are inclined to do is to, one Sunday afternoon, when we get this going, is ask a dozen or so neighbors if we can measure the water level in their well. We know where their wells are. You can use a geographic information system to put the well on a map, put the depths to the water on the map at one moment in time, and then map out the water level above or below sea level, whatever it is, among all of the houses in the neighborhood, say a dozen houses. Does that make any kind of a planar feature, which would be a connected water table, or is it completely random? If it's completely random, then what happens in your neighbor's well has no bearing on what happens in your well. But if you find some sort of tipped planar feature made by the water level in all these wells taken at one time, then you can say, yeah, what we do probably does influence what our neighbors are getting in their well, and what our other neighbors uphill from us are doing to their well affects us. So you say, great, I don't know geographic information systems, how do I know how to do this? David Perrier at the Cundy's Harbor Library is a GIS specialist. And he and I've talked about all of this stuff. So if you're curious about, do you have any kind of neighborhood scale information that would benefit all of you? Here's a way for you to experiment. If you like tinkering, here's a way for you to experiment to see just how connected the fractures are within your own neighborhood. I don't see being able to do it across all of Harpswell or across the Neck or across Orge or Bailey or Sebastian. But perhaps within your neighborhood, you could see how connected those pores are. And that would be helpful information for you to be a good community member. So, could be fun, could be a good experiment. If you do it, let me know. I want to see what happens. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm lost.
Okay.
We have wells, but they're not wells. There's not water in a well.
Mm-hmm.
We just have a water running through a pipe, right? Or running through a crack.
But your well taps into that.
Right, but that isn't a well. I don't have a bunch of water building up in some kind of a well down there.
The water will fill the well.
Pull up the pipe.
Casing. It's a metal casing. About, I don't know, 8 inches wide.
There's somewhere in your property is a pipe that sticks out of the ground, about 8 inches in diameter, and it's capped.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know how many 10, 20, 30 feet of your well presumably drilled into the rock. The top part is cased, and then below that is an opening that has water in it, and that water level fluctuates depending upon how much you use it and how much it gets recharged.
So it fills up that pipe.
It probably won't fill it to the
It
surface.
does though, Tom, yes.
But that's what you measure is how much water is in the
Is-
pipe?
is how
Going
deep-
this way.
How deep you go until you hit water, and that will vary during the year.
Okay.
The lowest water level will probably be about this time of year, because typically there's less precipitation and plants are drawing it because trees are growing.
Okay.
Yeah, but that will vary, and it would be really interesting for you to see how it does vary over time. Mhm. And this
I see
device,
that yours
I still
turning.
don't
That-
quite understand.
But it's interesting because when we moved into our house 23 years ago, I was being very cautious and just putting a very trickle, I ran the hose to water a new tree, forgot it overnight, and it was just a trickle. I got up the next morning, I had no water. So a lot of it is you use up that water in this, because the pipe, the water tends to come up by pressure in that pipe.
Okay.
And that's where you get into how fast does that recharge in that pipe.
Yeah.
And a lot of the wells that went dry during the summer, there's 2 ways you can lose your water. It dries out and then you get saltwater intrusion because it's lighter, which ruins the well. Or it's a case of you have to wait for it to recharge, and how long is that going to take? So that's, I don't, that helps understand the concept a little bit, I
Yeah.
think, yeah.
I can't believe my pipe holds a bunch of water, but,
You wouldn't think so, but I think a lot of it is how fast it regenerates.
yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously, you want to have it regenerate quickly,
Yeah,
because then you don't have to be worried. But all of us, are probably 90 or 95% of us, have no idea how quickly it recharges below. We're operating in the dark, so we,
right.
you have a house full of people, and it's August of 2021 or 22, and it's dry, and you have to wash dishes, and you have to clean the clothes and the sheets and so on. You don't know how quickly you're drawing down or it's filling back up.
Right.
This device can give you that
That will-
information
that
if you
will
want
tell
it,
you.
if you want to monitor it. If it works, and B, if you want to monitor it and you want to run a spreadsheet and make a graph, it's always fun, then you can do it. Plus, in theory, if you are on good terms with your neighbors and they're also interested in it, you can see whether or not below ground there is essentially a plane where on the top of this plane, or this plane is made up of water levels being connected within the neighborhood, being spatially connected within the neighborhood. And that would be a water table. Is there a water table that's neighborhood wide? And that would be helpful to know, because then you really do know how tightly bonded you need to be with your neighbor so that nobody runs out of water, or nobody's well goes salty.
Yeah.
So, could be cool. Let me know if you do it. David Perrier has the skills and the software to be able to do that GIS problem, and he's a good guy.
The other way, if you had a really shallow well, you could take a plumb line.
Yeah, and drop it
Take a
down.
plumb line and just drop it down till you hit that, and then pull it up and see where the string is wet. And you can measure it later. It's a kind of a manual process. Yeah.
I used to drop a pebble in ours.
And listen, yeah, time it. That's a great idea.
Yeah, well, that was back in the late 80s.
If you have a dug well, I think that's pretty realistic.
Oh, ours was 500 feet down.
That's
Oh
a
my
long
goodness.
now.
Yeah, no, sometimes they're wrong after that
You
pebble.
need an amplifier on that.
Yeah.
You look like you wanted to say something else. No?
No.
Okay. So I think it is possible to monitor your water level. All right,
Okay,
you want to go?
so a couple of things. This is pretty much the end of our program. And when we started this project, water wasn't, we hadn't had the drought yet. We started this before COVID, I think.
Yeah.
Because we were very concerned with the amount of trees that were being cut. And made us think about erosion and where are we going to have enough water, et cetera. So we have two handouts that are there. The one on the green, we tried to make it as easy as possible to understand the cutting of trees ordinance in Harpswell, and it's not easy. For those, all of us who live in the shoreland zone, how many trees you can cut now. So anyhow, on that sheet, on the green sheet, it has kind of some general things to keep in mind when you're getting ready to cut trees. And on the back side, it has the actual ordinance itself if you want to get more technical. Anytime you have a question, Tim Clark in the codes office is more than happy to talk to you. If you're doing a project, come out and look at your property. In fact, now on new developments, he's asking people to take a picture of their property before they start developing. It's easier for the town to figure out that a certain amount of trees have to be left, because it's part of the ordinance. So that is the green one. And then we talked about low impact development. Again, having to do with keeping water on the land and not having a lot of erosion. And we have some pretty, here again, it's towards the ordinances, but what to think about when you're building, and if you have a certain project of a certain size, you need to consider it as part of the ordinance. So that was our endeavor to make something that was a little user-friendly for the average person to figure out what they wanted to do when they went out on a weekend and saying, I need to cut this tree, can I? And it can get pretty complicated.
You did.
But Tim will always talk to anybody who comes in.
Trees are your friends,
Yeah,
and it's sad when they die.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So, So basically, we have information online, we have the ways to reach it. We can always be contacted by email at conservation@townharpswell.us. It will come to one of us to get back to you with your question, or refer you to the proper person that can handle it. And,
Or if you have a great idea for conserving.
or if you have a great idea, share it. Or if you have pictures you want to share, send them through, because we're just starting this program. You're the second time we've given it. We're going to be giving it throughout the town over the next year. We're trying to have it be very common to what the problems are here in town. So the more that we can have things that were taken in town or information from you as the residents, I just think it means more to people. So, so that's kind of our
That's the deal. If you are a member of a group and want us to come talk with you, we'd be happy to do it. If you want one of us to come out to your property or work with you on the software, be happy to do that. Those two websites, those two programs are really very, very helpful, very cool.
Interesting.
All right.
Thank you so much.
And just because there's just so much going on in town with meetings this
Yeah.
last 3 weeks, coming up next week, there's going to be, this is a comprehensive plan that's being worked on in town, which I hope you all have heard about. If not, I'd be glad to give you more information. We're working on a plan for how we want Harpswell to develop going forward. And next week, there's a special meeting that is going to be talking about climate resiliency and sustainability in relationship to how we plan ordinances and what you'd like to see happen in town. The following week is going to be on the working waterfront. And both of those meetings are at the community school at 6 o'clock on Tuesday nights, the next 2 Tuesday nights. So didn't want to let you know about it in case you haven't seen any of the handouts or anything. But I think it gives you the opportunity to listen to what is being said, as well as an opportunity to give some ideas that you might have. It's funny, I talked to one of the fishermen down at Glenn's Lobsters today, and for 5 minutes, and I got 3 things that they would like the town to think about. So just wanted to let you know about that. And I think for tonight, we just thank you for inviting us here to have the
Yes.
chance to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.